Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hear the Cannons. I am your host, Colin Hallboom, a writer over at BucsGameday, joined by our lead editor, River Wells. And of course, BucsGameday.com is the only Sports Illustrated website that is dedicated exclusively to covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're credentialed. We have numerous representatives at every Buccaneers game. So make sure you're staying dialed into all the work we're putting out over there. We are staying very busy. Our big team is always on it with full of Bucs content. And then the same goes for this YouTube channel. So make sure you are hopping over to YouTube, depending where you're watching us now. And please subscribe, turn on the notifications. Helps us out a lot. So, River, the future in question. We are at the break point of the season for the Buccaneers, with them having a bye week so that they get a little bit of a rest here. And it gives us an opportunity to not necessarily focus on an opponent this week, of course, because there is none. And at 4-6, having lost 4 in a row, it certainly is an interesting time to kind of reflect on what the team has accomplished thus far and what lies ahead. And as we discuss the future in question, I think you have to start with the status of this team's head coach, Todd Bowles.
I would agree.
So I want to ask you, has Bowles shown enough that it's time for the Bucs to move on from him, no matter what happens the rest of the way?
That's a good question. I would tell you, we were in the same exact position last year, weren't we? They were 4-7, and then the Bucs rattled off a ton of wins and got to 9-8 and won the division and won a playoff game. And you can't take that playoff game win away from Bowles. You can't take away the fact that this team played the Lions really close, a team that probably should have went to the Super Bowl last year. Brandon Ayuk and fumbles notwithstanding. But when you take a look at his first 2 seasons as head coach, I mean, he made the playoffs twice, won the NFC South twice with a 17-17 record over those 2 years. Now they're 4-6 again, and they will need to once again pull the rabbit out of the hat. And whether or not they can do that, you can talk about how statistically probable that is. The schedule, we'll talk about that later. But I mean, I think it's tough. I think right now the needle's probably moving in a certain direction of, if this team can't win the division and make the playoffs, you're going to have a real hard, long conversation about it. And Bowles is the commander of the defense, and this defense has simply not been good enough. They're bottom 3 in a few categories. They've actively given up a few games. They allow the 49ers to drive to get that game-winning field goal. They've been beaten in OT twice on the opening possession, and that's Bowles' job, right? And once that defense falters, and you have some conservative play calling and decision making, which has gotten a little bit better over the years, but not much, and you've got coaching mismanagement with timeouts, those things compound. So if this team doesn't make the playoffs, I think you do have to question whether he should be here or not. And the players love him. That's important. And he has shown some good things, but a lot of these problems that we're seeing with the defense are still there after 3 years. A lot of these problems we're seeing with clock management are still there after 3 years. A lot of these problems, personnel usage still there after 3 years. So that's something they're going to have to consider. I don't know if the Glazers will pull the trigger at the end of the season because they don't fire anybody midseason. Whether Jason Light will pull the trigger there, but I think it's a conversation to be had. And I think if you're at 4-6 at this point in the year, after being 4-7 at the last point of the year, unless another big run happens, I think there's a decent possibility that there's a different head coach here next year. So we'll see what they decide. But I think looking at where he was in 2022 as a head coach, where he is now, and the lack of improvements we've seen in a lot of different key areas, I wouldn't be shocked if that decision ended up happening at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think a lot of the game management decisions have been problematic and overly conservative for quite a while now. However, Bowles has managed to, I don't want to say get the most out of, but orchestrate an effective or above average defense, especially like the run stopping. Like that was kind of his MO. And
for sure.
But that's not happening. And
No.
there are serious issues at all 3 levels. And of course, you got to acknowledge the injuries they feel unprecedented. And I don't know if that's fair without me like digging into how many games have been lost by various teams, but that's certainly worth considering. But he's just all three levels. You know, the secondary can't cover. The linebackers sure as heck cannot cover. That's obvious. And then the defensive line, I mean, the majority of pass rush is coming from the inside thanks to Vea and Cansey. But, I mean, the edge rushers aren't doing enough. So there's just so many problems, and it feels like Bowles isn't quite willing to adapt. But, you know, you got to it. My next question was going to be, will the Bucs really do it? Because the thing is, I feel like the Glazers and Jason Light as well, and this is just a feeling from me, what does that matter? But there's a loyalty there, and in 2020, just 4 seasons ago, they don't win that Super Bowl without Todd Bowles calling that defense.
No, absolutely not. And his defensive acumen has been noted and seen and experienced by a lot of players in the league. I mean, Travis and Jason Kelsey were on New Heights, and they talked about how hard it is to play these Todd Bowles defenses. The soft zone type of coverage and the rally of the ball type of philosophy might be reliant on a very specific set of personnel. And I think the last 3 years, you've had problems there. You've had zone coverage busts. You've had these instances where people are wide up in the middle of the field. And they were really good in the red zone in 2023. Like, fantastic. Like, statistically and probably fantastic. And that helped a lot. And that also might just be because when you condense this defense, that sort of things, those sort of things won't happen as much. But the bend don't break thing doesn't work when you just break. And this year they're breaking. And injuries are unfortunate. And they have, especially at corner with Dean down, and you're going with Hayes, and you're going with Funderburk, and those guys aren't supposed to be playing at this juncture, but they're not an excuse. Every NFL team deals with injuries to some extent. And not all of them give up 400 yards a game and 3 touchdowns a game, So talk about the 49ers game. They gave up 23, but Jake Moody missed 3 field goals, 2 of which were inside 50, which is almost automatic this year for NFL kickers. So if you want to give him 3, which you don't have to, but that's 32 suddenly, right?
Yeah.
The 49ers very rarely ended a drive on their own side of the field and punted. So that's a problem. And if you're breaking and you're not just bending, then I think, like what you said, once that dynamic changes from average to above average to horrendous, and that's what you're in charge of, then you got to think about what that means for the future going forward.
Yeah, and we'll see if ownership and Jason Light are continuing to bend, or if they have finally reached their breaking point come season's end.
That was good. I like that.
Yeah, thank you. So on the other side of the coin, the other side of the ball, Liam Coen, first-year offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers, has absolutely destroyed any and all expectations, if you ask me. And
he's cooking.
And the injuries apply to him as well. But
yes.
But unlike Todd Bowles, we're not using that as a potential excuse, because if anything, he has made it. He's taken more on his shoulders and found ways to manufacture touches for whoever he has in the lineup. Just look at the usage of K. Dotton the last couple weeks. I mean, you're without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan as well, so your top 3 receivers. At least that was the expectation too. It's no question about it. And he is still finding a way to put up nearly 30 points a game against. It's been unbelievable, I think, just how his play sequencing, his scheme, the way that he's so flexible and willing to adjust and fit the personnel. He's not stubborn in a scheme, which, sorry to relate it back to the defense, but I feel like, you mentioned not having the personnel, you sometimes have to adjust. Anyway, My big question for you is this, and you can take it whichever way you'd like. But assuming, let's just say the Glazers and Jason Light can't forget about Todd Bowles' value and they're just a little too loyal and they decide to keep him around as the head coach next season, there's definitely a chance that happens. And if that does happen, what percentage of a chance do you see Liam Coen still returning as the offensive coordinator? Because, man, there's going to be a lot of openings around the league, a lot of interesting positions available to a guy like him, and the rest of the league is surely taking notice of what he's doing with this Buccaneers offense. Look what happened with Canales last year. He's a head coach now, and he wasn't doing nearly as much damage as Liam Coen is.
Oh, I agree. Low. I think it's low. especially given when you look at the openings around the league. I mean, let's talk about what you do have right now is New York, right? The Jets. You're gonna have Jacksonville. You're gonna have Dallas. You're gonna probably have Chicago. There's gonna be openings here, and there's gonna be some surprises too. As well.
The Lions could even have like an OC gig. He could potentially leave for an OC gig.
Right. So, and that's the other thing I want to talk to you about too. Is Ben Johnson had the opportunity to duck and run last year, and he didn't, and that's pretty rare. And he's mentioned he's going to be picky this time around, but I think Ben Johnson's going to get a head coaching job. There's a lot to like about some of these openings. Caleb Williams is in Chicago. I mean, that's just a rookie quarterback that you can have, or a second-year quarterback. Dallas has Dak Prescott, who, despite the internet being the internet, I think is a fantastic quarterback. So you got to deal with people like Jerry Jones over there. But, I mean, you've got an established veteran in Aaron Rodgers over in New York and Devontae Adams. And if you think you can take those pieces with your offense, your modern offense, then you can go for it. It's going to come down to whether Liam feels comfortable leaving and getting that head coaching job, and if he likes the opportunities out there. And if both those things check, I don't see why you wouldn't go. And I wouldn't blame him. I'd be really happy for him, actually, because he's been fantastic. You have a lot of fans talking about let's fire Bowles and then promote Coen, and it's not that easy. Light did this once before, if anyone remember, with Lovie Smith and Dirk Cutter. Now, I would argue that Coen is 2 or 3 times the offensive play caller and schemer that Dirk Cutter was. But
Cutter was coming off a good year, man. I was in favor of that decision at the time.
Right. Yeah. Especially, to develop Jameis Winston at that time, too. Now you've got Baker Mayfield already, who I'm bought in on Baker Mayfield personally. I mean, I think he's having another great year. He had a good year last year. He's continued it for 2 years in a row. We see what type of quarterback he can be. I'm in on Baker Mayfield. So that helps too. But yeah, I mean, if that's the case, if you do end up firing Todd Bowles, I'm not sure if they will, but if they do, I think your number one priority should be to get Liam Coen in that spot. But the last thing I'll say on this is that you run into a problem with a defensive head coach, which happened last year, is that if you have a defensive head coach and your offensive coordinator is fantastic, like Liam Coen is, and like some believe Dave Canales was, and they leave, then you're just going to have a rotating carousel of offensive coordinators in an offensive-dominated league. And you have to weigh that risk when thinking about keeping Todd Bowles. Is his defense good enough to warrant that constant change? Is his coaching good enough to warrant that constant carousel? Because I think in some places with some defensive-minded head coaches, it is. I don't know if it is here. So that's something they're going to think about as well with Liam Coen. A lot of questions being raised with how good this offense has been.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to, like, are you willing to lose Liam Coen to keep Todd Bowles? Like, I really do think it could potentially be that simple. But,
yeah,
hopefully they have a better read on that than we do behind closed doors at One Buccaneer Place. And, we'll see what happens. It'll be fascinating to monitor the progress of this team and
it will be
just how hot that seat gets for Todd Bowles, because the rumblings will only continue to ring louder and louder. Okay. So first off, I just not necessarily a question, but it is worth acknowledging just how crazy the injury issues have been for this football team.
For sure.
13 different starters by my count. Could be missing some.
I'm bad at math, so I believe you.
Yeah, we're English guys, right? 13 different starters have missed games this season, at least a game. Currently out, you got obviously Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Tristan Wirfs, Jamel Dean, Tyke Smith, Jalen McMillan. Hoping to have several of those guys back coming off this bye week, which will be big. But then other guys who have missed points or missed time at points include Antoine Whitfield Jr., Kalijah Canty, Vita Vea, Zion McCollum, Jordan Whitehead, Graham Barton, and Rashad White. So
Tristan Wirfs,
Tristan Wirfs. Exactly. So it has been borderline catastrophic so far, and hopefully that won't continue. But the one guy I want to focus on of those injured guys who this team desperately needs is Mike Evans. And I think, I don't know, do you have an update? It feels like he's going to be back for this Giants game after the bye. Do you have any intel on that, River?
Well, we talked to Baker Mayfield after the game against the 49ers, and he was talking about the injuries, saying they weren't an excuse. And he used the phrase, "We're getting 13 back after the bye," which seems to indicate immediately after the bye. And I know Mike Evans had a foundation event of his. Jenna Lane at ESPN, who does a great work, she talked to him, and he seemed to indicate as well that was the plan. So I would at this point be surprised if that wasn't the case, because it was a timetable of like, this is the earliest he could be back previously, but it's looking like that's the case, I think. So
hamstrings usually don't keep Mike down too long. Like
no,
he's had hamstrings in the past, but he's pretty dang durable when it's all said and done. Now, here's where things get real spicy. Mike has 335 yards receiving on the year. Not a lot. So with 7 games remaining, he will need to average 95 receiving yards per game in order to continue his incredible decade-long streak of 1,000-yard receiving seasons. The one thing I'll say is, like, look at what Cade Otton's doing right now as the focal point in this Liam Coen offense. Like, I don't think it's that crazy, even though he hasn't been anywhere close to averaging 95 per game so far this year. Godwin's been in the lineup. They've been spreading the ball around. Assuming he is healthy, what chance do you put it at? And I'm going to make you give us another percentage, I guess, that Mike is able to reach that 1,000-yard receiving mark.
I'd probably say unlikely.
That's
maybe
not
like
a percentage,
30%,
yeah.
like 20 or 30%. But I would tell you, look back at 2019. He only played 13 games in 2019. And he caught for 1,157 yards. So it wasn't even like the 2017 he got for 1,001 yards. So it is better than that. So he has the capacity to do it. He has the capacity to explode during games. He does that. I remember sitting in the press box last year for the Panthers game towards the end of the year. And he was I think he was like about 200 or so yards, maybe like 150 or 60 yards away. And we had a graphics guy, and I was like, hey, prepare a grab. I don't think it's going to happen this game, but just in case, prepare it. And he caught a massive catch and run all the way down the field and dove into the pylon. I was like, oh, he's probably going to hit it this game, and he did. So he has those games, and let me tell you, we talked to him one time in the locker room after practice, and a reporter was like, hey, I know the team awards are most important, but the team does is most important, and you don't focus as much on individual awards as a player. And he's like, no, I love individual awards. And,
he wants it. I like when you're not afraid to admit it.
He wants this streak, and he cares a lot about it. And I think that's really cool for a player to have the drive to cement his legacy like that. And he does. He cares about this streak. He wants it to happen. And everyone around him wants it to happen. Baker Mayfield was so adamant about making it happen, and he knew the guy for an off season, right? So people around him want him to get it. He wants to get it. And when he eats, the offense succeeds. So given that with Liam Cohen's philosophy of players over plays, it's possible still that he does hit it. It's going to be tough. 95 a pop is pretty tough. He'd need to go off for 1 or 2 games, and he can't really disappear for any more. So I think it's slim, but it's definitely possible, knowing Mike and the people around him.
Yeah, and I like how Mike's not afraid to admit that, because he's so team first with his actions, on the field. Yeah. He's always putting the team first. So there's nothing wrong with him admitting he wants it. You want that competitive drive from him. And when you're comparing his statistical achievements to the likes of Jerry Rice and Randy Moss and all this, who could blame him? You know what I mean? And I know everyone in Tampa and anyone rooting on the Bucs and just football fans in general would love to see Mike continue this streak. For sure. But I think your percentage is probably right in that 20 to 30% range. Not impossible, but pretty unlikely based on the time missed and the slow start to the year. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Something to follow, even if playoffs end up getting out of reach, will be Mike Evans' pursuit of 1,000.
That'll be the big thing fans start watching, I think, for sure, if the playoffs get out of reach. So
now, well, I want to talk about the title of this episode is Future in Question. We've talked about Bowles. We've talked about the questions about Mike Evans continuing his streak. But one positive here. We got to focus on some positive. The Buccaneers, I wrote a piece on this yesterday just summarizing, but PFF charted the remaining strength of schedule, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the easiest schedule by a significant margin. They are in an island all by themselves, and they're just plotting a grid based on defenses and offenses, a talent, and your opponents and where they fall on there, and then for the remainder of the games. And the Buccaneers only play one team with more than 3 wins so far under their belt, and that's the Chargers. So, I mean, 7 games to go. Buccaneers currently sitting at 4-6. They have 7 games. They're gonna have to come close to running the table. I'm just gonna take our listeners and viewers through, and you, River. I'll do a few too. The remaining opponents in order. So the Bucks coming off the bye in week 12, they are going to be at the New York Giants. Following that, week 13 at the Carolina Panthers. Week 14, they return to Raymond James to take on the Raiders. Week 15 is when they'll be at SoFi to take on Justin Herbert, Harbaugh, and the LA Chargers. That's the one team that has more than three losses. They're 6-3, the Chargers. Right. The beat-up Cowboys, led by Cooper Rush and whomever
or
else. Trey Lance. That's right. So they're heading to Big D, Jerry's World, in Week 16 to take on the boys. And then Week 17, they got the Panthers at home, and then they finished the season off against the Saints at home. So you can see why the Buccaneers are in a league of their own in terms of softest schedules. I mean, that is a tasty schedule. Yeah, like Bucs fans should be salivating as they look at that. And Bucs are 4-6, and a lot's gone wrong, but they could just as easily be 6-4 right now, without like very minuscule things going on here to turn the tide. So they're certainly better, I think, than almost all of those football teams. And
yeah, I agree.
First off, how do you see those games playing out, River? Those are they going to go 6-1? And if they do, is that enough for them to make the playoffs? Like, how they got to make the playoffs, my dude?
Well, they can.
They can.
My only reservation is I'm looking at Tampa Bay's defensive stats now. 31st in opponent yards per game, 389.3. 28th in opponent points per game, 26.6. You go to passing defense, right? They're 31st in passing yards per game, 264.1. You don't beat anybody with defenses like that, right? And I think they are better than a lot of these teams. They only have one more win than a lot of these teams, but they are better than a lot of these teams. But you keep playing that poorly on defense, you're going to drop some of those games. You're going to have games where whoever the Giants pedal out, end up getting you. You're going to have Derek Carr hit Rashid Shaheed or whoever it is. You're going to have to run the table or close, like 6-1, 7-0, just like last year.
These are NFL teams trying to win football games, and you like this.
Right, team, and Todd Bowles said this himself to his credit, because someone asked about how weak the schedule was, and he said, if you go into this stretch thinking the schedule is weak, you're going to lose every game.
Yeah,
I think the Bucs know that. To answer your question, I have ruminated about this, as one does. Thought about how the Bucs can make the playoffs. I think they're going to have to win the division. I think they're going to have to rely on the Atlanta Falcons dropping games. The wild card scenario is going to be very brutal. There's a lot of really good teams. You got the Packers in there. The 49ers, the Bucs lost to. That was going to be one of their biggest opponents in doing so. Looking at it here right now, 7th seed, the Packers at 6-3. 6 seeds, the Commanders at 7-3, and the 49ers, the 8th seed at 5-4. The Bucs lost to that team. You got tiebreakers over the Commanders and the Eagles, but one of those two teams is going to win their division. And the other might be a 6th seed, in which case you're out of luck there, right? There's going to be some good teams to compete with. I think Atlanta might just have to be terrible. And remember, Atlanta's up 2-0 on Tampa Bay. So you need to win one more game than Atlanta does to end the year. So you're asking Atlanta to drop multiple games in this scenario, which they might not, because they play a similar schedule.
They do. Similar, but a little more challenging.
It is a little more challenging, for sure. for sure.
Broncos, Vikings, and Commanders on that schedule.
Exactly.
All road games as well, and
Yeah, and they
Chargers.
got the Commanders at a bad time. The Bucks got on a very good time.
For sure.
So I think
First
that's
game
what
of
it's
the
going to
year.
have to take. I
Yeah.
think that's what it's going to have to take. I don't know what your thoughts are on it. I think it's possible, but I think that's what it's going to have to take.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I could to go 6-1. I mean, 5-2. 5-2, I think, is like legitimately probably what I would go with for these final 7 games if I had to predict the Bucs schedule.
And then you're 9-8.
Yeah,
right?
And you're 9-8. So
and that's
you're
not going to make a wild card.
No, you're totally right, man. You're right. It's got to be the NFC South for what, a 5th consecutive season? 4th?
Before.
4, yeah. I'm already getting ahead of myself. Maybe that's an omen. But yeah, so it's going to be the Falcons. The Falcons have to falcon and lose some tough ones, blow some big leads, right? Like they did in the Super Bowl.
They did drop that game to New Orleans.
They did.
Kirk Cousins did check the ball down with 5 seconds left in the game, so that happened.
And why couldn't he do that? Why couldn't he do that against us?
Yeah, well, because he was too busy throwing touchdowns and 1 trillion yards. So. Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. And you're right. Vikings will be tough. Broncos will be tough. Commanders will be tough. And I don't think the Falcons are a great team. I think they're good, but I think there's a lot of flaws in that team. So I think it's possible. But do I think the Bucs are a great team enough to almost run the table here? I don't know about that either. So that's what's going to have to come down to. I think we'll be watching the Falcons for the rest of the year to see if they do. But again, you're asking, you need to win. Well, the Falcons are 6-3, 6-4. The Bucs are 4-6, right?
Yeah.
So you need to win 3 more games than the Falcons.
3 more
at this point, right?
Yeah.
Because you got to get up to the even, and then you got to break the tiebreaker because there isn't a tiebreaker anymore. So tough, real tough.
It's similar, maybe similar percentages or to Mike Evans reaching 1,000 yards. Maybe those two will work hand in hand.
Maybe they'll happen together.
Yeah, that'd be nice. They will work hand in hand. Now, okay, I want to let's talk focus before we start to wrap up this episode on the biggest positives we can take away from what we've seen over the course of these first 10 games into the final 7 games. I mean,
sure.
For me, Liam Coen, the play of the O-line, which we haven't talked about much lately, but those guys are playing really well.
They really are.
And then the improved run game. I think the O-line though is pretty encouraging, man. Like, first off, the run game is a big part of that is due to the O-line, of course. I'm loving this stable of running backs that they have, that 3-headed monster. I think Bucky, Irving, and Rashad White play really well together. And it's too bad when Sean Tucker can't get in the game, but it's a good problem to have because if those guys are working, there's no need to force it, right? You don't need to create debate. But back to the offensive line, we've seen up and down play at points from the guards, especially Ben Bredesen and Cody Mauch, but Cody Mauch's really coming on now. And Gedeke a few games back is looking like Luke Gedeke again. And Ben Bredesen's playing some of the best football of his career at this point.
Which, I'm very pleased about that. It didn't look like that was going to be the case in the first few games.
Sure didn't, no.
And man, has he turned it around. He looks like a great free agent pickup right about now. He's playing good football. The whole line's gelling together really well. So big props to him and big props to everybody for getting that one together.
And the center position, and I say the center position, not just Graham Barton, because Graham Barton missed a little bit of time, and Robert Hainsey slid in there and played an amazing game in his absence. But
in New Orleans,
but Graham Barton, man, he's coming on too. His athleticism, it looks like he's settling into that role at center. He's starting to understand things better. He's climbing to the second level. He's finding a way to reach more athletic players. Fred Warner this past weekend, for example, so the sky is the limit for him. And then of course you got Tristan Wirfs, who looks like a top 2 tackle in football. I mean, top 3 tackle. Like, he's so good. He's on the shelf, but Bucs dodged a bullet with that one with the MCL. So offensive line, I just feel like there's been so much disappointment and heartbreak that unfortunately that's dominated the headlines and the things that we talk about. But those are some positives. Liam Coen, the O-line, and then this group of running backs. I don't know if you have any other that you think are worth acknowledging, like bright spots that could be taken in for a bit of momentum down the
Let's
stretch?
talk about Baker Mayfield.
Hey.
Baker Mayfield, there's always going to be a question when you extended him, can he do it again second year? And yes, he can. I mentioned earlier that I'm already bought in on Baker Mayfield, and I am. He's not perfect. Some bad picks in that middle stretch, and he did not play a good game against San Francisco. But otherwise, he's close to the league lead in touchdowns. He's thrown 24, which is very impressive. So he had 29 total last year. So he's already going to eclipse that. He's on pace for 40. I don't know if he'll get there, but he would be the second quarterback in Bucs history to do that besides Tom Brady, if that was the case. He's playing good football, gritty football. The team loves him. I don't think he's regressed. I think outside of – he hasn't thrown a pick in 2 games. So I should mention that there too. But he's playing really good football, and he's proving that, yes, he can do it again. And that, when you sign to this contract, which is – in terms of quarterback contracts, fairly cheap. You're getting a good player who can run this offense, especially under Liam Coen. They work really well together. So it's a positive for sure. I think Bake's playing some good football. I think he'll continue to play some good football. And that's got to be exciting to see as a Bucs fan. Probably a lot of Bucs fans and a lot of national fans who were curious to see if he could continue the momentum into a second year, and I think he absolutely has.
Yeah, he was almost written off in the league, right? Numerous teams gave up on him, so we can't forget that. And he's tied for the league lead with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow with those 24 touchdowns, which is 7 touchdowns ahead of Sam Darnold, who's the next guy in line there. So those guys are clearly head and shoulders above the rest in terms of finding the receivers in the end zone. Baker's top 5 in passing yards as well. And the crazy thing is, he's still got things he can improve on. And the one thing is like the deep ball accuracy. That's something I would like to see Baker zero in on. And right now, though, the guys he's got stretched in the field, it's harder. So it's hard to judge him on that. But if he could figure that out, his numbers could go up even higher. And the thing he brings to the table, and I don't want to be all rah cliche, but the leadership and the grit, like you talked about how this team still plays for Todd Bowles. No matter how much we're going to criticize his defense and his decisions, they still play for him.
They do.
And it is so obvious how much Baker Mayfield's teammates are motivated by his presence and want to perform well for him and are willing for him to lead them. Really established, veteran, talented NFL players are willing to follow Baker Mayfield in the battle every Sunday, no matter how many picks he's thrown in a given game. And I think that also speaks to the impact he's had and how great of a season he's had. So great point there, River, bringing him up. Biggest concern, Todd Bowles defense, Todd Bowles job security.
Defense. It's got to be defense. It's got to be, can you be even average for this next stretch? Because they have not been average. They've been quite bad. And,
as bad as anyone.
Yeah. So that's the biggest concern, because if you lose games in this stretch, that's how you're going to lose games. And it is an offensive dominated league, but you need a good defense to be a contender and to win football games, and they don't have it. So something's got to get figured out. Personnel changes, scheme changes. Jamel Dean coming back will help a bit, but I don't think he's going to be the fix-all for this defense. You're going to have to figure something out. And we'll see what Todd Bowles tries to figure out, if anything. And then that's going to go a long way into figuring out whether this team's going to be lost in the annals of NFL history or if they're going to make playoffs again. So we'll see.
Lots to be determined. And although the chances may be slim in certain areas, talking about Mike Evans, talking about the Buccaneers making the postseason, talking about Todd Bowles' job, whatever it is, there is still a chance. So nothing is decided at this point of the year, and that's important to keep in mind. On that note, River, I think it's about time to start wrapping this thing up. So to all of you who joined us watching live, we appreciate you. You can download the audio version of this podcast on any of your preferred streaming platforms. Please make sure to subscribe on YouTube. And make sure you're checking out BucsGameday.com, Sports Illustrated's only credentialed, all Buccaneers website. So make sure you're giving us a look every morning, because we got fresh content hot off the press every day for you. Thanks to our lead editor in chief, River Wells, right here myself and the rest of our team over at BucsGameday. We appreciate you joining us and look forward to talking to y'all soon. All right. Until next time, go Bucs.
Peace out.